League of Legends is a wonderful, exciting, and incredible esport, but for newcomers it can also be intimidating, overwhelming, and hard to learn. My name is TB Skyn, and with my amateur casting skills and a lot of editing, I'm gonna try and show you all why you should love this esport as much as I do. This is LCS for beginners. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Worlds for Beginners. For today's matchup we have Korea's SKT T1 and China's Edward Gaming. Now, these two teams are by far the favorites to win the entire tournament, so I thought I'd give you a little bit of background on them. SKT T1 are the Season 3 World Champions, a team roster that has remained dominant in its home region of Korea for much of its existence, with the wrinkle in the situation that they did not actually manage to qualify for Worlds in Season 4. They entirely failed to show up to Worlds after being the champions in Season 3, which was considered a major defeat for the team at the time. That being said though, they've had a dominant Season 5 so far, and they field a roster of players who are all considered the best in their roles, especially the mid laner Faker, who is almost universally agreed upon as the undisputed god of the mid lane position that he plays. On the other side, Edward Gaming from China have been dominant in their region as well. China is generally considered to be in the ascendant, especially after last year when many of the Chinese teams used promises of significantly better salaries and working conditions to lure away some of the best champion players from the Korean scene, leading some to call it an actual exodus of pro players from Korea to China. Edward Gaming also has a couple of Koreans on the roster, and they've been doing exceptionally well in China's LPL. While South Korea has typically been the top favorites to win the Worlds every single year, a lot of analysts and professionals are tipping that this might be China's year to take it. As we're only in the group stages of the World Championships, it is too early to draw conclusions, but this matchup between the two titans favored to win the entire tournament should give us some insight into what we might be able to expect going forwards into the quarterfinals and into the World Finals themselves. With all of that out of the way, however, let's get into Champion Select. Alright, we are into Champion Select. Now, the first thing that's going to happen in Champion Select is that each team will ban away 3 champions that they do not want their enemies to play. Teams can choose to take away champions that enemy players might be very comfortable or famous for playing, or they can choose to take away picks that would counter their own plans for the game, or who are simply overpowered in the current state of the game. Once the bans are complete, the blue team on the left side will pick their first champion, then the red team will pick 2 champions, the blue team will pick 2 champions, the red team will pick another 2, the blue team will pick their final 2, and the red team will lock in their final 1. As the pick and ban phase goes on, the teams will be reacting to each other's moves, trying to anticipate what the enemy team is attempting to do with their composition of champions. Having the very first pick of the game on the blue side will sometimes enable you to lock in a very contested champion that the other team might want, while having the last pick on the red side will give you the opportunity to see the entirety of your opponent's composition of champions and lock in your final pick based on that, so you might be able to counterpick something that they have picked, or bring out a secret weapon or an unconventional pick that your opponents were not counting on. With both compositions now locked in and finalized, however, let's take a look at the individual champions. Darius, the Hand of Noxus, is a juggernaut, slow, powerful, and almost unstoppable in the late game. He's a terrifying executioner who can obliterate low health enemies, and every single attack he lands on someone will bleed them over time, causing additional damage. While Darius is very powerful in a close-up fight, he does have quite a bit of trouble escaping bad situations and chasing enemies who are faster than him. Among his key abilities are Apprehend, with which he will grab an enemy with his axe, dragging them towards him. This is key for keeping his foes in range for follow-up damage and forcing them to stay in a toe-to-toe fight with him, which is where he's most powerful. Another ability is Decimate, which swings his axe in a circle, healing himself based on how many enemies he hits. With this ability, Darius can heal himself for quite a significant amount of damage if he's in the middle of the enemy team. This helps make Darius fairly durable in a close-up fight, even with multiple enemies attacking him at the same time. His ultimate is Noxian Guillotine, his most iconic ability. With this, he will dash instantly to a target, dealing heavy, unblockable damage to them. More importantly, however, if this ability kills an enemy, it can be instantly reused for a short time for absolutely free. Darius can get into the middle of an enemy team at the end of a fight and just start executing enemies one after another. As a trade-off for all this power, however, Darius is extremely vulnerable to getting kited by enemies who can stay at range and keep damaging him without Darius being able to get in range for his powerful abilities to do their work. Jarvan IV is a highly mobile jungler who's able to pick unconventional paths across the map to ambush his enemies. His ultimate gives him a heck of a lot of zone control, and he has surprisingly decent amounts of damage to deal out in a fight. Jarvan's most important ability combo is the Dragon Strike Demacian Standard, also known as the Flag and Drag. This is two separate abilities that can be used together for great effect. With the Demacian Standard, Jarvan puts a flag on the field. He then uses the Dragon Strike, which thrusts out his spear in front of him, to hit the flag and drag himself to it. This lets him drag himself over walls or out of bad situations, or it lets him chase enemies. Any enemies who are caught in the path of Jarvan as he is dragged to his standard will be knocked up into the air and disabled for a short time. The Demacian Standard also provides vision wherever it lands, allowing Jarvan to use it to scout for his team without getting into bad situations. Jarvan will use the flag and drag to jump out of bushes or jump over walls and suddenly ambush enemies from angles where they weren't expecting it. Jarvan's ultimate is the Cataclysm, which will leap to a target champion, dealing damage and creating a ring of impassable rocky walls. These walls prevent enemies from passing through the area, and when used in a small confined space, like the jungle and forested areas on the map, it can lock down entire areas of enemy movement, preventing them from acting as a unit and enabling Jarvan's team to take the win. Echo, the boy who shattered time, is a tricky, agile fighter who uses time travel to trick his foes and heal his own wounds. Echo's play pattern is based around using planning and quick reactions to outplay enemies, but as a trade-off, he is fairly fragile and quite vulnerable to sudden bursts of damage. Among his key abilities are Parallel Convergence, which after a delay will throw a sphere onto the field that slows all enemies that are caught inside it. If Echo himself enters the sphere while it's on the field, all enemies inside at the same time will be stunned and Echo will gain a shield, protecting him from damage for a short time. His most iconic ability is Chrono Break, his ultimate. After level 6, Echo is followed by a shadow that retraces his steps on a 4-second delay. Chrono Break will teleport Echo to that shadow, dealing a ton of damage to enemies around him and healing himself for a large amount. With this ability, Echo can dash into a fight, do all the damage he can, take a ton of damage back, teleport back out of the fight, healing himself and damaging any enemies foolish enough to follow him, before then re-engaging the fight. While Echo is a very difficult, intense champion to play, he has incredible potential for assassinating enemies and coming out ahead of situations where he really shouldn't be able to win. Because of his low durability, however, he does balance somewhat on a knife's edge. A single misstep with Echo can mean the difference between victory and defeat. Kalista is an AD carry or marksman who relies on mobility and lots of cooperation with her lane partner to do a ton of physical damage in combat. She has the ability to stack heavy amounts of damage on single or multiple enemy targets, but she does require a bit of time to really make her damage stick. In the beginning of a game, Kalista will pick an ally and form a bond with them. She can then cooperate with that ally to do extra damage to foes or even throw her ally at the enemy to knock them up and set up powerful teamfights. Every single time Kalista attacks an enemy with a spear throw, she can use that throw to push herself in a particular direction, doing a little hop, making her extremely mobile and hard to catch. Among her key abilities is the Sentinel, which will send out a ghost to patrol an area. If the ghost spots an enemy champion, it will follow them around and scream loudly, alerting Kalista and her team to their presence. Another important ability is Rend. Every time Kalista throws a spear at an enemy, it will lodge in them for a short time, and she can activate Rend to deal heavy damage to the enemy based on the number of spears she's managed to stack in a particular target. Her ultimate is called Fate's Call, with which Kalista will pull her partner into herself, making the partner invulnerable for a short time, and the partner can then launch themselves in a particular direction to knock up and damage any enemies they hit, or throw themselves out of dangerous situations. Fate's Call is extremely potent for saving a partner who's about to die, and throwing an ally into an entire team of enemies is an incredibly effective way to set up a teamfight. Annie is a support mage who was originally designed to be played in the mid lane as a damage-focused magic user. As such, she has a lot more damage in her kit and her abilities than a lot of other supports and is a very aggressive laner. The key thing to look out for about Annie is that every 5th spell she casts will stun anyone it hits. The readiness of the stun is indicated by a white swirl around Annie's body. While she has this on her, look for her to go aggressively towards the enemy and for the enemy to back off immediately. The reason for this is her ultimate Summon Tibbers. When this spell is cast, it will summon a giant flaming bear onto the field to deal heavy magic damage in an area and maul any nearby enemies. The bear remains on the field attacking enemies and doing damage to everything around it with a flame aura. When combined with the stun effect she gets from every 5th spell casts, it becomes an incredibly powerful area of effect lockdown. Annie will look to use this to engage teamfights, dealing heavy damage and locking up multiple enemies. Unfortunately, since Annie doesn't have any movement ability, she relies heavily on the summoner spell Flash. This summoner spell has a long cooldown, and when it is not available, Annie becomes significantly less efficient. Another key ability for Annie is the Incinerate. When she casts this ability, enemies in a cone are scorched by magic damage. When Summon Tibbers is not available, she will usually use this to try and engage fights, as it becomes an area of effect stun when it's cast along with her passive. Renekton, the Butcher of the Sands, is a fighter, tough in a brawl, and a bit of a lane bully early on in the game. Renekton is a huge, beefy champion with a lot of damage early on in the game that he uses to impose his will on the early stages of any match. Because, unlike a lot of champions, he doesn't use mana to power his abilities, in the early game he can be an overwhelming presence against his immediate opponents. As a trade-off, however, while he is powerful in the early game, as the game goes later and later, Renekton's effectivity tends to fall off quite hard. Among his key abilities is the Slice and Dice, which is actually an ability that can be cast twice in a row. It allows Renekton to dash forward once, damaging any enemies in his path. If he hits an enemy, he can dash one additional time. This ability allows Renekton to escape quickly so long as he has targets to dash through, and it also enables him to chase down enemies who are fleeing in an area where there are lots of targets for Renekton to dash through to get to them. Another important ability from Renekton is called Ruthless Predator, which will damage and stun one enemy, and if Renekton's Fury Bar is high, he can increase the stun duration and really hold them down for a long time. This allows Renekton to catch out single enemies and engage them in a duel that they might not be able to win. Renekton's ultimate is Dominus, with which Renekton will grow much larger, gain a lot of bonus health, and deal damage over time to all nearby enemies. This ability makes Renekton extremely powerful and difficult to kill for a short time, but when it is not available, his power does decline significantly. Rek'Sai is an extremely mobile and extremely aggressive jungler with a number of curious twists to her gameplay. First of all, Rek'Sai's gameplay revolves around being burrowed or unburrowed at various times and taking advantage of different abilities while in each state. Above ground, Rek'Sai has much better damage output and can see like a normal champion, while below ground she is much more mobile but does not have any vision whatsoever. While underground, instead of vision, she has what's called the tremor sense. Any enemies that are moving around near Rek'Sai will cause little ripples to appear on the map that Rek'Sai can see, essentially representing where their footsteps fall. Rek'Sai can always tell whether someone is walking around near her, even if she cannot tell who exactly it is. This makes it very difficult to hide from Rek'Sai unless you're standing perfectly still, in which case Rek'Sai, while burrowed, will have absolutely no idea where you are. Among her most important abilities is the Burrow-Unburrow ability. Now, this does more than simply switch Rek'Sai between being above ground and below ground. When she emerges out of the ground, unburrowing, all enemies near her will be knocked briefly into the air. She is rather a fragile champion, so she relies on the element of surprise, getting underneath the enemy and knocking them into the air in order to be effective in a fight. Another key ability is Tunnel. It will tunnel her a short distance across the map, leaving behind a tunnel that can be reused after a short time. With this ability, Rek'Sai can essentially create a network of tunnels across the map, allowing her to move extremely quickly in and out of key positions. Enemies can, however, collapse these tunnels by briefly standing on top of them. Her ultimate is the Void Rush. When she uses this ability, she will rush to any one of her tunnels on the map with absolutely mind-bogglingly extreme speed. It is incredibly quick. The catch, of course, is that if her enemies are destroying all of her tunnels, she cannot use the Void Rush at all, and if she doesn't have a tunnel in a good position, Void Rushing to it, well, might be quite irrelevant. Also, it's worth noting that if Rek'Sai takes any damage whatsoever while she's winding up to use this ability, it will be cancelled. So Rek'Sai has to be very careful about the timing of when she uses it. It is great for getting into combat, but it is completely useless in combat. Ryze, the Rogue Mage, is a brawling, up-close, tough spellcaster who relies on short windows of overwhelming power to destroy his foes utterly in close combat. He is fairly weak early in the game, but scales up to become something of an unstoppable monster as the late game rolls around. He has a relatively short range and can be dodged around, but has a number of tools for getting up close and personal with his enemies, where he can deliver his overwhelming damage. Among Ryze's key abilities is Overload, which will throw an orb of magic in a line that deals damage to the first enemy it hits. this. It has a relatively short cooldown, which only gets shorter as the game goes on, so by the late game, Ryze can practically machine gun this ability to deal tons of damage to any enemy who's foolish enough to get close to him. Another important ability for Ryze is Rune Prison, with which Ryze will root an enemy in place briefly, also dealing damage to them. This is key for staking on enemies and keeping them in range for Ryze's other abilities. Ryze's ultimate is Desperate Power. Passively, it shortens the cooldown on all of Ryze's abilities at levels 6, 11, and 16, letting him cast them faster at all times. When he uses Desperate Power, his abilities deal damage in an area and drain life from all enemies they hit. This lets Ryze regenerate his health in a fight and is a key part of his team fighting power. Ryze is a champion organized entirely around windows of power. If you catch him when he's not benefiting from a window of power, he is relatively manageable to deal with, but if he catches you while his power is at its highest, you are absolutely going to go down. Sivir, the Battle Mistress, is a high-mobility AD carry or marksman who deals physical damage to the enemy. Sivir has a relatively moderate range and lower damage output than a lot of AD carries, but provides a lot of utility for her team. While she's not the most powerful champion in single combat, her ability to speed up and help her team makes her a potent addition to any team composition. Among her key abilities is the Boomerang Blade, which, as the name indicates, will throw a blade in a line, dealing damage going out and again coming back. This is great for clearing out waves of enemy minions and for poking the enemy at range. Another important ability is her Spell Shield, with which she can block a single enemy spell and all of its effects, granting Sivir mana upon a successful block. Sivir can use this to block any enemy spells, including their biggest, baddest, most powerful attack spells. And in so doing, she can not only keep herself safe, she can also deny them the opportunity to use those spells on her teammates. Sivir's ultimate is On the Hunt, with which she will grant herself and all of her nearby allies an absolutely massive boost of movement speed for a few seconds. While this may not sound like such a big deal, in a team game like League of Legends, the ability to outrun, outposition, and generally outmove your enemies is an incredibly important part of successfully playing the game, especially on the professional level. Braum, the Heart of the Freljord, is a durable defensive support champion. He's a versatile defender of his fellow teammates with an incredible ability to block enemy attacks and stunning and locking down enemies by cooperating with the rest of his teammates. Among his key abilities are Concussive Blows, his passive ability which is always on. Concussive Blows causes Braum's attacks to put a mark on the enemy which stacks with every subsequent attack from Braum or his allies, and at 4 stacks the victim will be stunned and damaged. Braum will use this ability to mark as many enemies as he can, allowing his allies to attack them in rapid succession. This forces enemies to play very carefully around Braum, as the stun and the extra damage from his passive can be devastating if it's triggered at the wrong time. Another key ability for Braum is Unbreakable. Braum raises his shield and blocks all incoming projectiles from a particular direction. This means that if a powerful ability is flying towards one of his allies, Braum can basically get in the way of it and almost completely negate all the damage from it. His ultimate is Glacial Fissure, which will slam a huge line of ice across the field, knocking up enemies and slowing anyone who enters the field of ice for a short time. This ability allows Braum to knock up and disable multiple enemies and set his team up for a powerful team fight, or to help his team get away from a bad fight by disabling the enemy long enough for everyone to escape. So, with all of this explained, let's head on to Summoner's Rift. Welcome to Summoner's Rift, ladies and gentlemen, for EDG versus SKT T1. China and Korea in a truly titanic matchup between the two favorites for the entire tournament. Now, the first thing that's going to be happening in the early stages of this game is that both teams are moving across the map and putting down early vision using the trinkets in their inventories. They do this in order to gain early information about where the enemy team is going and what their game plan might be. You can see SKT moving across this watered river area, just scouting out to see if they can't find EDG somewhere on the map, putting down their vision, and hoping to gain some notion of exactly what the early game plan is for the enemy team. EDG, for their part, are doing the same thing, securing their own territory down on the bottom side of the jungle here as SKT keep moving across the map, checking. Just, you can see Faker throwing spells around, and he's hoping that if someone is lurking in a bush or somewhere that he can't see them, the spell will hit them, and when they get hit by a spell, he will know that they're there without having to walk in and put himself in danger to check it. We do have 4 members of EDG stacking up on the bottom side here. They might be looking to set up some sort of a play or waiting for SKT to show up. It's very much a set of mind games right now, because while we can see everybody, most of the team's members don't have vision of each other. So EDG right now are going in relatively blind. They might have a pretty decent idea that 4 members of SKT are similarly on the top side of the map, and they're going to steal away this big monster, the blue buff in SKT's side of the map. This is a buff that makes you able to cast your spells more quickly, and it regenerates your mana very quickly, and Faker in particular will find that spell incredibly valuable. He really wants to be able to have that, especially for the early game. So stealing that away, and stealing away the big frog monster called the Gromp, EDG are putting themselves just a little bit ahead, gaining some extra resources, and getting a bit of an advantage up on EDG in the early game. But now Pawn is actually very far into enemy territory. 4 people chasing him out of mid lane there. He does manage to get away, but that was an extremely risky move from the EDG mid laner, and he takes a bit of damage for his troubles. And he's straight back on the aggression, actually. He's pushing very hard onto Faker right now. Faker is playing Ryze, a champion who is relatively weak in the early game, so Pawn is hoping to abuse him for that, and just hoping to prevent Faker from getting too much gold, from getting too much experience, too much power early on. While SKT's jungler and top laner Marin and Bengi have decided to move into EDG's jungle and steal away the blue buff from in there. Now, just like for Faker, Pawn relies very much on this blue buff in the early game to give him some extra power, and now that he doesn't have it either, they've effectively leveled the playing field versus SKT. And another thing that they're doing very early on is they're up in the top side of the map. They're beating up on EDG's outer top turret there, but EDG are doing exactly, or almost exactly, the same thing down in the bottom. They only have 2 people doing it though, which means SKT are going to be a little bit faster destroying the turret, while EDG might have to wait for a few more moments. Now, this is not a huge difference, but you can see in the minimap, if you look on the bottom side, bottom right-hand corner of the screen, you can see that EDG did not have time to finish up the turret. They had to back off because they ran out of minions who could tank up those powerful turret shots for them. So now they're going to go for the dragon instead, and going for a dragon at 3 minutes or 4 minutes in this instance, you can see that they're all quite low on health because the dragon is a pretty powerful monster, and fighting him this early in the game, you're going to take a lot of damage, and everybody has to go back to base. They're recalling right now to heal themselves back up before they can get back out on the map, which means they're going to lose a lot of presence on the map. They have 3 people who spend some time taking dragon, and SKT know that they took the dragon, who now have to go back home, and it takes a long time for them to get back onto the map. So this gives SKT a bit of breathing room. They can do other things in the meantime. So why did EDG take the dragon so early, risk that dangerous fight with a monster? Well, when you kill the dragon, you gain a buff. You gain a small power-up that makes you more powerful, and it stays with you for the entirety of the game. Now, the first power-up you get when you kill 1 dragon is not that big a deal. Neither is the second one you get for killing 2 dragons over the course of a game. But once you kill 3, 4, and especially 5 dragons, you gain pretty significant increases in power, so it's an early investment that doesn't pay off a lot right now, but which can pay off later in the game for EDG. But as a consequence, you can see in the top side of the screen, you can see that EDG has 6.6 thousand gold, while SKT has 7.8 thousand gold. Because EDG spent all those resources taking down the dragon, SKT have spent the time wisely across the rest of the map, just basically pressuring those turrets by killing enemy minions, by shoving their own minion waves into the turret. They've forced EDG now. You can see them playing quite defensively here in the bottom lane, and not really being willing to go out too far, just waiting for the minions to come to them. And it's going to take them a little while to sort of equalize that pressure back out. And this is a relatively high-level strategy. You won't necessarily see much of this if you play the game casually, because it is 100% about the team play on this level. It's 100% about things happening in the top lane and the mid lane affecting what happens in the bottom lane as well, and what happens in the jungle, and teams reacting as an entire unit to what the enemy team is doing. So small movements across the map, just very small advantages, is what teams will use to snowball into big ones. And Faker, they're pushing away Pawn just by running at him aggressively. The thing about Ryze is that he's a champion who has some trouble getting up close with enemies, but once he gets up close, he can basically machine gun them to death with extremely powerful spells. He's not as powerful in the early game as he will be later on, but he's still powerful enough that Pawn doesn't really want to go toe-to-toe with him, especially now that he knows that Bengi is nearby as well. So Faker is using that, knowing that Pawn doesn't want to fight him. He runs at him very aggressively and forces him to back off, which forces Pawn to miss out on farming the minions, which will give him gold and power that he needs to become powerful later on in the game. So Faker is just mind-gaming him out of a lot of resources. Now, Clearlove moving into SKT's side of the map there, he was probably looking to see if he couldn't find someone to kill, but SKT are wise to it and they back off as EDG finally take down their first turret of the game, finally equalizing some of that gold, and Faker just once again running at Pawn, just saying, if you want to fight, I'm right here for it, mate. And Bengi coming in from the side as well, keeping the pressure on. Pawn at this point is going to have to be a little bit worried because he essentially just doesn't have a chance to get farming down so long as Faker knows that if I put the pressure on, he's gonna back off. He doesn't want to fight me, he can't fight me. And Bengi is spending a lot of time around the middle lane to make sure that if Pawn took Faker up on the challenge, said, okay, let's duel, let's fight, then Bengi could come in from the side and secure a kill. So Pawn is in a little bit of a pressured situation here, and we see something similar in the top side of the map. If you look at Amazing J and Marin down on the bottom of your screen, the top of the inventory, you can see that Amazing J has 30 CS. He has killed 30 creeps, but Marin has killed 55. So Marin is really winning that lane. Not a lot has happened in the top lane. We haven't looked at the top lane because it's very much an island in games like these. It doesn't really... Nobody goes up there a lot, and it doesn't affect the rest of the map that much yet, but so far, Marin is doing a hell of a good job just holding Amazing J down. And if Amazing J can't power up in the early game, become a factor, then he becomes much less powerful in the late game when it comes time to get into the big fights, get into the big epic confrontations. Amazing J is just not gonna be as powerful, and that's what Marin is essentially is his game plan right now. It's just hold him down, prevent him from being a factor later on in the game, and then we'll use that advantage to gain some sort of to win some team fights and perhaps turn the game out. And once again, Pawn just getting shoved away. Faker is not letting him spend any time farming the minions there. You can just see... And Faker uses his ultimate ability, which is called Reckless Power. He uses that very freely. Every time he sees an opportunity to shove Pawn away, he uses his ultimate and says, I'm at my most powerful right now, fight me, bro. And Pawn has to back away because he just simply cannot stand up to Faker in a toe-to-toe fight. And this is extremely aggressive movements that could be punished if Clearlove was nearby. Faker could be in a little bit of trouble because Faker is very far into enemy on the enemy side of the map right now. If Clearlove came in behind him, he would essentially have no chance. But Faker knows where Clearlove is because his team has done a pretty good job keeping vision across the map, keeping wards on the field. Faker is confident that Clearlove can't be nearby right now. I saw him in X position X seconds ago, which means he doesn't have time to run up to where I am, so I can be aggressive, I can push him back. And again, this is the sort of high-level mind play that the pros always engage in, where they're very carefully keeping track of how many enemies can I see, where could the ones I can't see be, how aggressive can I play right now and be relatively safe. So EDG, Clearlove has spent some time in the bottom lane, quite a lot of time actually, trying to see if he couldn't get a kill off down there, but he's been spotted out by another ward by SKT, very well placed. That's sort of just keeping him from being effective, because every time they see him show up in the bottom lane, Deft, Bang, and Wolf just back off. They just don't go forward. They just, oh, we're just gonna stay back where it's safe now, because we know the jungler is there. And Clearlove just has not had a chance to be effective, or to set up an ambush for his team at all. And because he spent so much time trying to set up ambushes, while Bengi has been killing monsters and earning gold, Bengi is actually quite a bit ahead of him right now. And now Faker, though, getting jumped on. Finally, 3 people finding him in the mid lane. The first blood going over to Mako, of all people. That was 3 people roaming to the mid lane to make sure they got that kill on Faker. Pawn had gotten very tired of being shoved out of lane all the time. And now with Faker taken down, a very significant part of SKT's team fighting, EDG are looking to take down the second dragon of the game for themselves. And they should be able to get it, honestly, because without the mid laner, SKT aren't really in a position to fight for this, but they're gonna try for it anyway. Wolf now coming in, moving in very aggressively there. He's taking a lot of damage. Faker's coming in with a teleport, but Wolf has already gone down. Pawn has taken him out almost immediately, but SKT are moving forward. They're taking out Clearlove. They've taken out Pawn, and oh my word, this fight is going absolutely in SKT's favor. Faker teleporting in at exactly the right time. Amazing J doing his best to get Bang, but Bang, oh, almost gonna survive the bleeding effect from Darius'. Attack is gonna take him down. Finally, so far it's a 4 for 3. And SKT managed to take away the dragon. Holy heckerim, that was an explosive fight. That was SKT being extremely aggressive in a situation where they shouldn't have been able to be that aggressive, but because it was so early in the game, oh, Deft now getting caught underneath his own turret, Marin and Faker making mincemeat out of him before anyone has a chance to respond. Pawn is coming in, trying to see if he can't get something back, but he's 2 versus 1 here. Faker is very low on health, and Pawn is doing his best. Oh, he's doing a lot of damage to Marin as well. Pawn has actually managed to pick up a powerful item called the Morello Nomicon, which gives him a lot of early game power, which is why he was able to duel 2 people from SKT just there. But that was a risky situation, and Deft still ended up dying, meaning a total of 5 kills going over to SKT. You can see them engaging the fight here. They don't have Faker, but they're so aggressive that EDG are a little bit discombobulated. They back off a little bit, and that gives Faker time enough to come in, and then he just starts machine gunning people. And you can see Marin in the front line there, just running at EDG, making sure they can't get to Bang until it's too late. Now finally, Bang does get taken out by Amazing J, who manages to find him at the back, but at that point, Bang has done all the damage he wants to do. It is essentially way too late. So SKT outplaying EDG in a massive team fight here. And as we get back onto the map after the replay, we see that a bit more aggression might be coming out here. We see a lot of members hanging around the middle area of the map, but nobody seems to be willing to make a move just yet. So, as I said, Pawn has just picked up his first major item, which is a huge power increase for him. It's gonna make him quite a bit more powerful going forward. Faker has done the same thing for himself, picking up a Rod of Ages, which, like Ryze as a champion who's weak early and gets more powerful later on, the Rod of Ages is not super powerful just yet, but over the next 10 minutes it's gonna grow in power and gain more and more stats and provide Faker with more and more power. So it's something that will become more powerful as Faker does in other ways as well. So while it doesn't make him a huge threat right now, even though so far he's demonstrated he really is a threat because he's just that good, it's something that's gonna make him a huge threat come the late game. And Faker there taking away the blue buff as EDG once again move into SKT side of the map and steal away the blue buff from there as well. They've been trading these back and forth quite a bit this game so far, but because EDG spent some time in SKT side of the map, SKT is saying, well, you're not in the middle lane, so we're gonna take down this turret, and we're gonna get some gold for that. They're up to a 3,000 gold lead now on EDG, which is pretty significant at only 15 minutes into the game or so. So that massive team fight down by the dragon represented a hell of a power play for SKT because their composition relies a lot on early game power with Marin, their top laner. He plays Renekton in this game, and Renekton is a very powerful champion who can really bully people early on in the game, but in the late game, later on in the game, he does tend to fall off quite hard if he doesn't have a significant lead on items. So having 2 kills and assisting with 3 other kills is a lot of gold in his pocket, which is going to let him get some powerful items early, and it's going to let him keep being powerful as the game goes on. If he had fallen behind, if he'd not been able to bully Amazing J early on in the game, or if he'd gotten ambushed by Clearlove, he might have been in quite a bit of trouble and become quite weak in the late game and quite useless to his team. Now we see Deft and Mako going very aggressive onto Faker there, using Deft's ultimate to throw Mako forwards, hoping to catch out Faker, but Faker knew it was coming and backed off appropriately. But there is a lot of positioning around this middle lane. You can see EDG are destroying the little wards that SKT are putting out on the map. They're destroying those totems that just sit around the map as much as they can, and this denies vision to SKT. Those wards are a crucial part of gameplay because they provide you with information about what the enemy is doing. For instance, SKT have a ward right there where Clearlove is dealing with the big frog monster, the Gromp, which means they know where he is, and they know he can't be in the middle lane right now, he can't be in the bottom lane for the next at least 30 seconds, so we can play safely there. The jungler isn't gonna show up and ruin our day. So that ward, even though it only costs 30 gold or so, and even though it was just randomly placed there on a whim, and oh, Amazing J taking a hell of a lot of damage from Marin here. Marin really putting down his early game power. He has finished a big item before Amazing J was able to, and now Amazing J does not stand even a hint of a chance in a close-up fight. That was a very effective solo kill from SKT's top laner. That's disheartening for Amazing J, because his Darius, quite like the Renekton, Darius is someone who can be a bully early on, but if he doesn't get his items, if he doesn't get going, he can be really weak come the late game, because he needs to be big and beefy and tanky and able to absorb a lot of damage. But in order to do that, he needs items. He needs gold to buy those items, and he's 50 CS behind Marin, and he's been killed twice, and he's really been put far behind, and is somewhat of a non-factor in this game, actually. And you can see Clearlove there, just clearing out warriors once again, and it is a constant contest between pro teams who can put down the better vision across the map, who can gain more information about what the enemy is doing. And the team with the more gold has more resources to put into buying those wards, so that's a way that you can snowball an advantage. Like, you start out just getting a bit of extra gold, you invest that gold into wards, and those wards allow you to pick the best fights, which lets you get further ahead, and that's how you build up the sort of lead that you need to win a game. But if you look at the minimap, you can see a lot of little red dots all across the map, which indicate either tunnels placed down by Bengi's Rek'Sai, or they indicate wards from SKT, giving them information about what's going on in EDG's jungle. And because SKT have been so aggressive in putting down wards in EDG's side of the map, EDG has also spent a lot of time dealing with those wards, because they know that SKT have been putting them down, so they have to invest time and effort into getting rid of them also, which is something that's just inconveniencing them, taking them away from the lanes a little bit, just causing them a little bit of extra trouble. Fortunately, EDG are a very good team. They're very, very good at doing this, so it doesn't cost them as much as it might cost a less able team. But it is something that's worth keeping an eye out for in a game like this. And Amazing J, once again, Marin just stamping authority on this top side of the map, and he's going to take down that turret for himself as well. Amazing J just at this point must have realized that he simply cannot fight Marin anymore, and now he's just doing damage control. He's just trying to not die again. So he's backing off very early. He's not being aggressive. He's not challenging Marin for control over the lane, as SKT take themselves a second dragon of the game. Like I said, dragons stack up over time. The bonus becomes more and more powerful as the game goes on. So 2 dragons are not a huge deal just yet. It's a nice extra bonus for SKT, but it's not going to let them win the game. But if they can get this to 3, 4, or especially 5 dragons, it could essentially be game-ending for them. It is going to take a while, though, because the dragon takes 6 minutes to respawn every time you take it down, so if they're going to get to 5 dragons, it's going to be at least 18 minutes yet for the necessary dragons to spawn on the map. So that's a very late-game objective to be looking towards, but it's something SKT are happy, even if they're not going to get the 5th dragon. At least this way they make sure that EDG aren't going to get it either. So, big push from EDG in the mid lane. They've realized that SKT are a little bit out of position, and they're going to take down this turret for themselves without any sort of contest from the enemy team. That was SKT misplaying just a little bit, allowing EDG to get essentially something free without any retaliation whatsoever. And that's a bit of a no-no in professional play. You can't let the enemy have something for free. You have to make them pay by taking away something of theirs, or engaging a fight, or stealing away an important objective somewhere else on the map while they're engaged dealing with your turret. It's really quite important to always counter your opponent's moves, otherwise you do get put behind. So it's a good sign for EDG that they can still pull off plays like that and capitalize on SKT not being quite where they're supposed to be. So, a number of major items are coming out for both teams. They've started finishing up their first 2 most powerful items, which is generally an indicator that we have left the early stages of the game and are heading into the mid to late game. And this is a situation where in the early game you may have noticed everybody was just sort of walking around the lanes, killing the minions, and not really being too aggressive across the map. But now, oh my god, Deft gets caught out entirely by Faker and destroyed before he has a chance to do anything about it. Deft dying without even putting up a fight. That's him being very much out of position, but also Faker knowing exactly when to go in, exactly when to hit his power spike. And now they're hiding out alongside the big powerful Baron up in the top side of the map here, just waiting for EDG to come check on it, because EDG cannot let SKT kill the Baron uncontested. The Baron is a very powerful monster, it's very difficult to kill, but if SKT can kill it, they gain a huge advantage in map pressure, because killing the Baron gives you an aura on every single living player on your team that makes the minions near you much more powerful, and makes them start pushing the lane and start destroying towers. And it's not something that sounds like a big deal, but in a game like this, it really is an absolutely enormous deal, because pushing down towers and pressuring the map like that can put an enemy team completely on the back foot when it comes to pressure. Which is why EDG, you can see, if you looked at the minimap at that point, you could see them all moving up towards that Baron area. They had to make sure, they were pretty sure that SKT were just sitting there waiting for them to come, they were just baiting them. But they also couldn't take the risk of it not being a bait. They couldn't take the risk that SKT were actually doing the Baron. So they had to go check. Now Bang & Wolf deep in enemy territory, a little bit caught out here. If EDG can collapse on them, that's very bad for SKT, but they don't have any luck with it, and now Marin has teleported in. Seemingly he was looking for a fight, but he couldn't quite find the right engagement, and so he backed off instead, and now SKT clearing out all of EDG's vision around that Baron. So long as EDG can't see what's going on at the Baron, then anytime SKT aren't in vision elsewhere, they have to assume that they could be up there attacking the monster, which they're actually doing right now, doing quite a bit of damage to it. EDG probably realize that something is going on here, but they're not being fast enough in responding, so this Baron is actually going to go over to SKT with no contest. Marin just playing bodyguard here, just making sure that EDG aren't coming in time to deal with them, and now EDG finally collapsing on the Baron area, but it is much, much too late. SKT taking that away without any contest from EDG whatsoever. That's a huge mistake from EDG, and a huge win for SKT in a very early Baron. Taking down the Baron at 23 minutes is unusually early in the game, because as I said, it's a very powerful monster. You really don't want to fight the Baron and the enemy team at the same time. That's a really risky proposition, because the Baron deals a lot of pain to you while you're trying to take him down. But because EDG did not respond, because they were too busy doing things elsewhere on the map and forgot that they had no vision over the Baron area, it was super safe for SKT, and now they have all that map pressure. You can see it right now, Marin, you can see the minions that are near him have these big purple auras around them, and his melee minions get bigger, and they're just gonna be a huge pain in the ass for Pawn to take out. You can see he's almost doing no damage to them whatsoever, because that aura makes them resistant to magic damage, which is exactly the kind of damage that he does. Which means that without any trouble whatsoever, Marin just shoves Pawn back into his own turret as Clearlove and Bengi get into a little bit of a fight in the jungle. They're both tanky though, so they really can't kill each other with any kind of speed. That would have taken forever if they were to go for that. But it means that Marin can easily push lanes, and it means that SKT can just easily push through any enemy resistance onto the enemy turrets and start putting the hurt down on them, unless the enemy puts up a full defense, putting all their members on defensive duty around the turrets, which means EDG can't do anything else. They have to be on the defense all the time. And because, as you can see, SKT shoved in the middle lane and the bottom lane, and EDG were busy defending, SKT are just going to rotate their entire crew over to the dragon, kill the dragon without any contest whatsoever, and because of the pressure from the Baron buff, they extended their lead by taking down another dragon. Now, the third dragon of the game is when those bonuses that you get from it start becoming pretty significant. This is a movement speed increase that you get from the third dragon, and that's actually a big deal for the teams, because when you can move faster than the enemy, you can catch them when they're trying to run away, and you can run away from them better than they can catch you. So that's actually, even though it's only a 5% increase in movement speed, that's actually a pretty big deal. So the teams will be quite happy to, or SKT will be very happy to have that, because it also means they can move across the map faster and pressure the lanes faster, and EDG will be even more hard-pressed to respond. At this point in the game, EDG are, even though they're not super far down in kills, they're quite far down in gold. And even though they haven't gotten killed a lot lately, they might get killed quite severely if they get into a fight, because they're just too far behind to fight SKT in a big, full-on, close-up brawl of a team fight. So what they really want right now is to get a smaller fight, to catch out 2, maybe 3 SKT members with 4 or 5 of their own, kill them off really quickly, and then with SKT at a numbers disadvantage, they can finally do some pushing elsewhere across the map. But this still requires SKT to be out of position. It requires them to make some sort of a mistake. So it's really hard for EDG to make a play right now. They have to wait for SKT to screw up somehow, to give them some sort of an opening that they can use to get into a fight. Now, Clearlove getting caught out by Faker. He was going to go in rather than running away this time. EDG have decided to take this fight, but so far they're really losing it. Pawn is already very low in health, and Clearlove is going to go down out on the outside. They're Def doing the best he can, but Marin is just too big and tanky to be taken down, and Bengi as well, also not going to be dying anytime soon, and Pawn paying for this attempted team fight with his life, being a 2-0 going over to SKT, and they lose absolutely nothing for that victory. And because EDG are now down 2 members, SKT are just going to push on this middle. Sorry, they know EDG can no longer defend it. So they're going to take that down, gain extra gold, and at this point their gold lead is almost 12,000 at 27 minutes, which is absolutely enormous. This is a huge advantage for SKT. What you can see here, Clearlove gets caught. Now he gets caught out by Faker, he takes a lot of damage, he realizes, okay, I can't get out of this, I'm just going to have to go in, and we're just going to have to hope that this works. But it just doesn't, because they're just not powerful enough. You can see Marin coming in from the backside there, cutting off Deft, destroying Clearlove before he can get away. And this forces Deft and Maiko to spend the entire team fight separated from Pawn and separated from the rest of the team, trying to fight slightly further up on the map. And because they're all separated out, they can't work together, while SKT are still a coherent unit. So that cohesion from SKT is essentially what won them the team fight almost as much as their other advantages, because they split up EDG and just picked them apart one by one. And there's nothing you can do in that situation, nothing whatsoever. Like I've said earlier, the game at this level is all about the team play, and if your team play is superior, even if the individual players on your team are not as good as the enemies, you will still win the game. So SKT have not given up the pressure on this middle lane, but Marin is now off on the side doing what's called a split push, where he splits off from the team and pushes one of the side lanes. This forces someone to go respond to him. Amazing Jay's gonna try, but he's 3 levels behind Marin. He's 100 CS behind. He does not have the items or the power to fight this big crocodile. So all he's gonna try and do is kill the minions. Just kill the minions, prevent Marin from pushing them into the turret, hopefully not get himself solo killed by Marin. But you can see SKT moving quite a few people up towards the top side of the map, just taking away everything in the jungle on EDG's side of the map. They're killing all the monsters that EDG would normally have been able to capitalize off on. You can see Clearlove and Pawn finding the wolves are still there and taking them away immediately, but SKT have been doing a good job just killing everything in there, denying that resource from EDG, which means they have a somewhat harder time, even if they can find the peace and quiet to roam into their own jungles, get away from defensive duty all the time. There's nothing in the jungles for them to take. There's no gold, there's no experience. You can see Bengi stealing away the raptors there, the big bird monsters, and he's going to steal away the red buff as well, and there's just nothing left for EDG to take. And this is SKT putting a stranglehold on the game, essentially, because as I said, even if EDG can disengage from defensive duty, even if they find some time to go pick up resources across the map, there's nothing left on their side of the map. There's no gold for them. There's no experience for them. They can't ameliorate their deficit right now on their own side of the map. It just isn't gonna happen. And they realize this as they scout out their own jungle. Now they're just going to put down vision around the Baron. But Clearlove gets caught out trying to scout. And Mako himself also getting pulled away by Deft, just trying to get him out of that bad situation. Marin gets knocked up, takes quite a lot of damage actually. But he pops his ultimate and just goes straight back in. Amazing J doing what he can, but it's not going to be enough. Wolf gets knocked up, but they just can't do any damage to him. Faker, though, is going to go down finally in the middle of the enemy team. Bengi as well, caught out quite a bit by Deft there, taking a lot of damage, but he seems to be able to get away from this one as Marin picks up a double kill. Amazing J and Pawn both going down to him, and now he's going after Deft. Deft, though, says, I'm faster than you, you can't catch me, so I'm just gonna run away from you. But Marin has not given it up. He's gonna dash through the minions, gonna see if he can get onto him, but Deft manages to get behind the safety of his own base turret. Heart pounding, I am sure. Now, that was almost a better fight for EDG. They got really close to getting something good there because Bengi was low, they took out Faker, and Marin took a lot of damage early on and might have been a valid target. If they could have taken him down, maybe they would have had a chance. But in the end, they lose 3 members for 1 on SKT. And the gold lead for SKT simply extends. Now, SKT, because they lost Faker, decided not to go for another Baron just then. Apparently, they didn't feel quite confident in it. So EDG did prevent SKT from taking that Baron, from taking that extra advantage, but that's only a temporary respite. And after this, the pressure is simply going to mount. Now, at this point, EDG, as you've probably realized, are really in a bad situation. They're in a very bad spot as SKT are taking away their 4th dragon of the game, and I don't think EDG can do anything about this. They're in a very bad spot because they're being pressured on all fronts, and they're only barely surviving teamfights. You can see Clearlove getting completely caught out there. He did not realize 2 people were there waiting for him. Mako taking a ton of damage early on as well. Now, Marin in the backside there does get taken down to almost half health, but then he pops his ultimate, then he gets assistance from the rest of the team, and before they could finish the job, the rest of SKT just pile in on them, and while Bengi and Faker do get caught out a little bit, it's just not enough. And now another team fight breaking out around the Baron. Wolf's taking quite low early on, but now Marin is coming in from the backside, splitting up EDG, spending a lot of resources trying to deal with a big crocodile, but that's going to leave them vulnerable to everything else coming out of SKT. Faker himself low on health, but machine gunning people to death. 2 people go down immediately from EDG as Pawn just tries to run away from Bengi, and he's probably going to be able to as well. He's a pretty fast champion, but Bengi's just zoning him away as SKT now have decided we can take on the Baron. We can get that bonus back once again. They only lost their support in Wolf. And now Pawn on super low health. You can see Bengi using his ultimate just to rush past him, cutting off his escape, so now he has to run into enemy territory, hoping to get away from the kill team that are chasing him. He's going to use his teleport, and Faker, almost catching him with a spell there. But Pawn does get back to safety without dying, but that was a tense situation for him, and it delayed his return to base for a long time, which means he was off the map for longer than he wanted to be. And you can see Deft doing his best to clear out those minion waves, to just get rid of that pressure just pouring onto their base constantly from SKT, who have extended the gold lead to actually above 15,000 at 34 minutes into the game. Like I said, EDG is in a situation where there's very little they can do to win, except try to stall the game. The thing about the game is that the longer it goes, the less the leads matter. If everybody gets to their full item builds at 6 items, can't buy any more items, can't gain any more levels, then everybody gets back onto equal footing. So as the game goes on, SKT's lead will shrink and shrink and shrink the longer the game goes, which is why SKT are being very aggressive and trying to finish it off here. EDG now getting caught out, Deft himself getting destroyed before the fight has even really started. And now, even though it's a big brawl in the middle there, this EDG does not have the damage, they do not have the stats to deal with SKT. All 5 members of EDG destroyed in the blink of an eye. A huge brawl from SKT as they take down the Nexus turrets, and they're gonna take down the Nexus and take an extremely convincing victory over China's #1 team. These were 2 teams that everybody was tipping would be in the finals fighting each other. These would be the huge Clash of the Titans super finals for the World Championships. This is what everybody's been saying in the lead up to the tournament, during the tournament as well. But SKT have just shown that if you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile, and if you give them an inch in the finals, they're definitely going to take the championship. This was a statement of power from Korea's SKT T1. And EDG will have quite a bit to think about as they revise their strategies and tactics going forward into the tournaments. It is only the group stages so far, so they have time yet to make up their mistakes and try and figure out what went wrong. But if you feel like you have learned enough from watching this that you can follow the tournament on your own, well, it's going on right now. You can go to twitch.tv/Riot Games to follow it on weekdays. You can go to lolesports.com to see a schedule for all the games that are going on. But if you feel like you could probably learn some more, there are some questions you might have, leave them down in the comments, and subscribe to this channel for more beginner-friendly videos. My name has been TV Skyn. I've been talking way too long, and as you see the professional shoutcasters coming up on the screen there, I'm just gonna say that I will see you next time. Ambush enemies from angles where they weren't expecting it. Jarvan's ultimate is the Cataclysm, which will leap to a target champion, dealing damage and creating a ring of impassable rocky walls. These walls prevent enemies from passing through the area, and when used in a small confined space, like the jungle and forested areas on the map, it can lock down entire areas of enemy movement, preventing them from acting as a unit and enabling Jarvan's team to take the win. Echo, the boy who shattered time, is a tricky, agile fighter who uses time travel to trick his foes and heal his own wounds. Echo's play pattern is based around using planning and quick reactions to outplay enemies, but as a trade-off, he is fairly fragile and quite vulnerable to sudden bursts of damage. Among his key abilities are Parallel Convergence, which after a delay will throw a sphere onto the field that slows all enemies that are caught inside it. If Echo himself enters the sphere while it's on the field, all enemies inside at the same time will be stunned and Echo will gain a shield, protecting him from damage for a short time. His most iconic ability is Chrono Break, his ultimate. After level 6, Echo is followed by a shadow that retraces his steps on a 4-second delay. Chrono Break will teleport Echo to that shadow, dealing a ton of damage to enemies around him and healing himself for a large amount. With this ability, Echo can dash into a fight, do all the damage he can, take a ton of damage back, teleport back out of the fight, healing himself and damaging any enemies foolish enough to follow him, before then re-engaging the fight. While Echo is a very difficult, intense champion to play, he has incredible potential for assassinating enemies and coming out ahead of situations where he really shouldn't be able to win. Because of his low durability, however, he does balance somewhat on a knife's edge. A single misstep with Echo can mean the difference between victory and defeat. Kalista is an AD carry or marksman who relies on mobility and lots of cooperation with her lane partner to do a ton of physical damage in combat. She has the ability to stack heavy amounts of damage on single or multiple enemy targets, but championships, it is too early to draw conclusions, but this matchup between the two titans favored to win the entire tournament should give us some insight into what we might be able to expect going forwards into the quarterfinals and into the world finals themselves. With all of that out of the way, however, let's get into Champion Select. Alright, we are into Champion Select. Now, the first thing that's going to happen in Champion Select is that each team will ban away 3 champions that they do not want their enemies to play. Teams can choose to take away champions that enemy players might be very comfortable or famous for playing, or they can choose to take away picks that would counter their own plans for the game, or who are simply overpowered in the current state of the game. Once the bans are complete, the blue team on the left side will pick their first champion, then the red team will pick 2 champions, the blue team will pick 2 champions, the red team will pick another 2, the blue team will pick their final 2, and the red team will lock in their final 1. As the pick and ban phase goes on, the teams will be reacting to each other's moves, trying to anticipate what the enemy team is attempting to do with their composition of champions. Having the very first pick of the game on the blue side will sometimes enable you to lock in a very contested champion that the other team might want, while having the last pick on the red side will give you the opportunity to see the entirety of your opponent's composition of champions and lock in your final pick based on that, so you might be able to counterpick something that they have picked, or bring out a secret weapon or an unconventional pick that your opponents were not counting on. With both compositions now locked in and finalized, however, let's take a look at the individual champions. Darius, the Hand of Noxus, is a juggernaut, slow, powerful, and almost unstoppable in the late game. He's a terrifying executioner who can obliterate low health enemies, and every single attack he lands on someone will bleed them over time, causing additional damage. While Darius is very powerful in a close-up fight, he does have quite a bit of trouble escaping bad situations and chasing enemies who are faster than him. Among his key abilities are Apprehend, with which he will grab. League of Legends is a wonderful, exciting, and incredible esport, but for newcomers it can also be intimidating, overwhelming, and hard to learn. My name is TB Skyn, and with my amateur casting skills and a lot of editing, I'm gonna try and show you all why you should love this esport as much as I do. This is LCS for beginners. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Worlds for Beginners. For today's matchup we have Korea's SKT T1 and China's Edward Gaming. Now, these two teams are by far the favorites to win the entire tournament, so I thought I'd give you a little bit of background on them. SKT T1 are the Season 3 World Champions, a team roster that has remained dominant in its home region of Korea for much of its existence, with the wrinkle in the situation that they did not actually manage to qualify for Worlds in Season 4. They entirely failed to show up to Worlds after being the champions in Season 3, which was considered a major defeat for the team at the time. That being said though, they've had a dominant Season 5 so far, and they field a roster of players who are all considered the best in their roles, especially the mid laner Faker, who is almost universally agreed upon as the undisputed god of the mid lane position that he plays. On the other side, Edward Gaming from China have been dominant in their region as well. China is generally considered to be in the ascendant, especially after last year when many of the Chinese teams used promises of significantly better salaries and working conditions to lure away some of the best champion players from the Korean scene, leading some to call it an actual exodus of pro players from Korea to China. Edward Gaming also has a couple of Koreans on the roster, and they've been doing exceptionally well in China's LPL. While South Korea has typically been the top favorites to win the Worlds every single year, a lot of analysts and professionals are tipping that this might be China's year to take it. As we're only in the group stages of the World Champ, it does require a bit of time to really make her damage stick. In the beginning of a game, Kalista will pick an ally and form a bond with them. She can then cooperate with that ally to do extra damage to foes, or even throw her ally at the enemy to knock them up and set up powerful team fights. Every single time Kalista attacks an enemy with a spear throw, she can use that throw to push herself in a particular direction, doing a little hop, making her extremely mobile and hard to catch. Among her key abilities is the Sentinel, which will send out a ghost to patrol an area. If the ghost spots an enemy champion, it will follow them around and scream loudly, alerting Kalista and her team to their presence. Another important ability is Rend. Every time Kalista throws a spear at an enemy, it will lodge in them for a short time, and she can activate Rend to deal heavy damage to the enemy based on the number of spears she's managed to stack in a particular target. Her ultimate is called Fate's Call, with which Kalista will pull her partner into herself, making the partner invulnerable for a short time, and the partner can then launch themselves in a particular direction to knock up and damage any enemies they hit, or throw themselves out of dangerous situations. Fate's Call is extremely potent for saving a partner who's about to die, and throwing an ally into an entire team of enemies is an incredibly effective way to set up a team fight. Annie is a support mage who was originally designed to be played in the mid lane as a damage-focused magic user. As such, she has a lot more damage in her kit and her abilities than a lot of other supports, and is a very aggressive laner. The key thing to look out for about Annie is that every 5th spell she casts will stun anyone it hits. The readiness of the stun is indicated by a white swirl around Annie's body. While she has this on her, look for her to go aggressively towards the enemy and for the enemy to back off immediately. The reason for this is her ultimate Summon Tibbers. When this spell is cast, it will summon a giant flaming bear onto the field to deal heavy magic damage in an area and maul any nearby enemies. The bear remains on the field attacking enemies and doing damage to everything around it with a flame aura. When combined with the stun effect she gets from an enemy with his axe, dragging them towards him, this is key for keeping his foes in range for follow-up damage and forcing them to stay in a toe-to-toe fight with him, which is where he's most powerful. Another ability is Decimate, which swings his axe in a circle, healing himself based on how many enemies he hits. With this ability, Darius can heal himself for quite a significant amount of damage if he's in the middle of the enemy team. This helps make Darius fairly durable in a close-up fight, even with multiple enemies attacking him at the same time. His ultimate is Noxian Guillotine, his most iconic ability. With this, he will dash instantly to a target, dealing heavy, unblockable damage to them. More importantly, however, if this ability kills an enemy, it can be instantly reused for a short time for absolutely free. Darius can get into the middle of an enemy team at the end of a fight and just start executing enemies one after another. As a trade-off for all this power, however, Darius is extremely vulnerable to getting kited by enemies who can stay at range and keep damaging him without Darius being able to get in range for his powerful abilities to do their work. Jarvan IV is a highly mobile jungler who's able to pick unconventional paths across the map to ambush his enemies. His ultimate gives him a heck of a lot of zone control, and he has surprisingly decent amounts of damage to deal out in a fight. Jarvan's most important ability combo is the Dragon Strike Demacian Standard, also known as the Flag and Drag. This is two separate abilities that can be used together for great effect. With the Demacian Standard, Jarvan puts a flag on the field. He then uses the Dragon Strike, which thrusts out his spear in front of him, to hit the flag and drag himself to it. This lets him drag himself over walls or out of bad situations, or it lets him chase enemies. Any enemies who are caught in the path of Jarvan as he is dragged to his standard will be knocked up into the air and disabled for a short time. The Demacian Standard also provides vision wherever it lands, allowing Jarvan to use it to scout for his team without getting into bad situations. Jarvan will use the flag and drag to jump out of bushes or jump over walls, and suddenly